The turning point wasn't the bed. It was the morning routine that proved it wasn't accidental. I walked into Callan's kitchen in one of his shirts, half asleep, and he casually handed me coffee. 2 sugars, no cream, exactly the way Owen made it every morning. When I got home and tried to act normal, my husband didn't argue. He just asked me to open my phone and show him the last message I'd sent him the night before. I hesitated because I knew what was there. Don't wait up. Then Owen showed me something I didn't know existed. He had screenshots of Callan's Instagram story, posted at 4:06 a.m., with my laugh clearly audible in the background, and my name tagged like I belonged there. My casual relax suddenly sounded like the insult it probably was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when I still believed I could control the narrative. The sunlight streaming through Callan's bedroom window felt different than the light in my own house, warmer somehow, less judgmental. I stretched under his navy blue comforter, momentarily forgetting where I was, until I saw the framed poster of some indie band I'd never heard of hanging on the opposite wall. "Shit," I whispered, sitting up quickly. The movement made my head throb, a reminder of exactly how much wine I'd consumed at Rebecca's birthday party the night before. My phone showed 8:47 a.m. and 3 missed calls from Owen. I could hear Callan moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of morning routine filtering through the thin apartment walls. Coffee brewing, cabinet doors opening and closing, the gentle clink of ceramic mugs. Standing up, I realized I was wearing one of Callan's old college t-shirts, soft grey cotton that hung to my mid-thigh. I had no memory of changing clothes, though I vaguely remembered spilling red wine down the front of my dress sometime around midnight. "Morning, sunshine," Callan called out when he heard my footsteps on the hardwood floor. "Coffee's almost ready." I found him standing at the counter, his dark hair still messy from sleep, wearing only pajama pants. We'd been friends since high school, but something about seeing him shirtless in the morning light made me suddenly aware of how this might look to an outsider. "I should probably head home," I said, though I made no move toward the door. "Owen's probably wondering where I am." Callan handed me a mug, white ceramic with a chip on the handle, and I was struck by how perfectly he'd prepared it. 2 sugars, no cream. Exactly how I liked it. Exactly how Owen made it for me every morning for the past 8 years. "How did you know?" I asked, taking a sip. "Know what?" "How I take my coffee." He shrugged, that easy smile spreading across his face. "I pay attention, Lise. Always have." The nickname sent a small shiver through me. Owen called me Lysandra, or sometimes Liz when he was being affectionate, but Callan had been calling me Liz since we were 17. It felt intimate in a way I hadn't noticed before. My phone buzzed. Another call from Owen. "I really should go," I said again, but I didn't move. Instead, I found myself settling onto one of Callan's bar stools, cradling the coffee mug between my hands. "What's the rush? It's Saturday." Callan leaned against the counter across from me, his own mug steaming in front of him. "Besides, you were pretty upset last night. About the thing with Owen's mom." I grimaced, remembering. Judith had made another one of her passive-aggressive comments about my priorities during dinner earlier that week. Something about how I spent too much time going out with friends and not enough time focusing on my family. Owen had just sat there, nodding along like he always did when his mother criticized me. She gets under my skin, you know? And Owen never stands up for me. Never." "Maybe he doesn't know how," Callan suggested. "Some guys aren't good at confrontation." "Or maybe he agrees with her." The words came out more bitter than I'd intended. "Maybe he thinks I'm a terrible wife and mother, too." "Tessa adores you," Callan said firmly. "And Owen. Well, Owen's lucky to have you, even if he doesn't always show it." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. When was the last time Owen had said something like that to me? When was the last time he'd really looked at me, not just glanced up from his laptop or phone? "You're a good friend, Cal." I reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. Thank you for listening last night, and for letting me crash here. Any time, he said, his fingers lingering against mine for just a moment longer than necessary. You know that. My phone rang again. This time I answered. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Sorry, I was in the shower. At Callan's? Owen's voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear something underneath it. Suspicion? Hurt? I couldn't tell. I told you last night, I was too drunk to drive home. Colin offered to let me crash on his couch. A pause. You texted me, don't wait up at 2:30 a.m. I didn't want you to worry. Another pause, longer this time. I'll see you when you get home. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling the first flutter of anxiety in my chest. Everything okay? Callan asked. Fine, I said quickly, just Owen being... Owen. But as I gathered my things and prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The way Owen's voice had sounded so controlled, so measured, like he was thinking very carefully about every word. I hugged Callan goodbye at his door, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, mixed with coffee and morning air. For just a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like if this were my life. Lazy Saturday mornings with someone who actually paid attention to how I liked my coffee. Someone who listened when I complained about my mother-in-law. Someone who made me feel seen. Drive safe, Callan said, his hand resting on the small of my back. I will. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone to check Instagram. Callan had posted a story sometime during the night, a blurry photo of his living room with music playing in the background. I could hear voices, including my own laugh, bright and carefree. He'd tagged me in it. I quickly deleted the tag and made a mental note to ask him to take the story down. Owen didn't need to see evidence of exactly how much fun I'd been having while he was home alone with our daughter. The drive home took 15 minutes, and I spent every one of them rehearsing what I'd say. I'd crashed on the couch. Nothing happened. Callan was just being a good friend. Owen was overreacting, as usual. But when I walked into our kitchen and saw my husband sitting at the table with his laptop open and a cup of coffee growing cold beside him, I realized my carefully prepared explanations might not be enough. Morning, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. Sorry I'm so late. Callan made breakfast and I didn't want to be rude. Owen looked up from his screen, and I was struck by how tired he looked. Dark circles under his eyes, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Breakfast, he repeated. Just coffee and toast, nothing fancy. I moved to the coffee maker, needing something to do with my hands. Where's Tessa? Still sleeping. She had a nightmare around 3, kept asking for you. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? You were busy. I turned to face him, defensive now. I was drunk, Owen. Would you have preferred I drive home and risk getting a DUI? Or worse? No, he said quietly. I wouldn't have preferred that. Something in his tone made me pause. This wasn't the Owen I was used to, the one who got flustered during arguments, who raised his voice when he was upset. This Owen was calm, almost eerily so. Are you angry with me? I asked. He closed his laptop and looked at me directly. Show me your phone. What? Your phone. Show me the last text you sent me. My heart started beating faster. Owen, this is ridiculous. You're acting paranoid. The text, Lysandra. I hated when he used my full name like that. It reminded me of being in trouble as a child. But I pulled out my phone anyway, navigating to our text thread with shaking fingers. There it was. 2:31 a.m. Don't wait up. See, I said, holding the screen toward him. I was just letting you know I was safe. Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out his own phone. He swiped to his screenshots folder and turned the screen toward me. It was Callan's Instagram story from 4:06 a.m., the one I'd untagged myself from. But Owen had captured it before I could delete my name. The timestamp was clear, and my laugh was unmistakable in the background audio. "You told me not to wait up at 2:30, Owen said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. "But you were still awake and laughing at 4:06, in his apartment, tagged like you belonged there." I stared at the screenshot, my mind racing. It's not what it looks like. "What does it look like, Lysandra?" "We were just talking, old friends catching up. I couldn't sleep, so we—" "In his bedroom." "What?" "No, in the living room. On the couch." Owen nodded slowly, like he was filing away my answer for future reference. "On the couch." "Yes." "In his t-shirt." I looked down at myself, still wearing Callan's grey college shirt. I spilled wine on my dress. He lent me something to sleep in. To sleep in, on the couch. Yes. But even as I said it, I could hear how weak it sounded, how many holes there were in my story, and from the look on Owen's face, he could hear them too. "I'm going to take a shower," I said, desperate to escape his steady gaze. "We can talk about this later, when you're being more reasonable." I made it halfway to the stairs before he spoke again. "I saved the story, Lysandra, before you untagged yourself." I froze, my hand gripping the banister. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes," Owen said quietly. "You do." By Monday morning, I'd almost convinced myself the whole thing would blow over. Owen had been distant over the weekend, but he hadn't brought up Friday night again. We'd gone through the motions of normal family life, grocery shopping, Tessa's soccer game, Sunday dinner with his parents. Judith had been even colder than usual, though. When I'd complimented her pot roast, she'd just hummed non-committally and changed the subject. And when Tessa had mentioned that Mommy had been gone for a sleepover, Judith's eyebrows had risen so high they'd nearly disappeared into her hairline. "A sleepover?" she'd asked, her voice dripping with false innocence. "With Uncle Callan," Tessa had chirped, oblivious to the tension suddenly crackling through the dining room. "Daddy said Mommy had too much wine and needed to sleep somewhere safe." Owen had smoothly redirected the conversation to Tessa's upcoming school play, but I'd caught the look that passed between him and his mother. Disapproval mixed with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Now, sitting at my desk at Morrison & Associates, I tried to focus on the employee handbook revisions I was supposed to be reviewing. As an HR assistant, my job was usually predictable: processing paperwork, scheduling interviews, dealing with the occasional workplace drama. Nothing too complicated. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Clara. "Coffee later. Need to catch up." I smiled, grateful for the normalcy. Clara and I met for coffee at least twice a week, usually to gossip about our respective relationship dramas. She was going through a rough patch with her boyfriend Marcus, and I was always happy to provide a sympathetic ear. "Absolutely," I texted back. "The usual place at 5? "Perfect. Can't wait to hear about your weekend." Something in that message made me pause. Can't wait to hear about your weekend. It sounded almost knowing, but that was impossible. Clara didn't know about Friday night. Nobody did except Owen and Callan. And Ivy. I'd forgotten about Ivy until that moment. Callan's on-and-off girlfriend who had a tendency to check his social media obsessively. If she'd seen his story before, I untagged myself. My phone rang, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, birthday girl," I answered, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "How's the hangover recovery going?" "Slowly," Rebecca laughed, "but I wanted to thank you again for coming Friday night. It meant a lot to have everyone there. Of course, it was a great party." "Yeah, about that." Rebecca's voice shifted, becoming more serious. "I heard you ended up at Callan's place afterward. Everything okay at home?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Ivy mentioned she saw something on Instagram. She seemed pretty upset about it." "Ivy's always upset about something," I said quickly. "She's jealous of any woman who talks to Callan for more than 5 minutes." "Maybe," Rebecca said, but she didn't sound convinced. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. You seemed pretty frustrated with Owen on Friday night." I had complained about Owen at the party. I remembered that now. I'd had a few drinks and started venting about his mother, about how he never stood up for me, about how I felt invisible in my own marriage. Rebecca and the others had listened sympathetically, but now I wondered if I'd said too much. "I'm fine," I said. "Just normal marriage stuff, you know. Nothing dramatic." "Good. Well, I should let you get back to work, but Lise, if you ever need to talk, I'm here." After she hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen without seeing it. How many people had seen Callan's story? How many people were talking about it right now? I pulled up Instagram and navigated to Callan's profile. The story was gone now. They only lasted 24 hours, but the damage might already be done. I started typing a text to him, then deleted it, then started again. "Hey, did Ivy say anything to you about Friday night?" His response came quickly. "She's being weird, asked a bunch of questions about you staying over. I told her nothing happened." "Good, because nothing did happen." "Right, nothing happened." Something about the way he phrased it, like he was agreeing with me rather than stating a fact, made me uncomfortable. But before I could respond, my manager, Jennifer, appeared at my cubicle. "Lysandra, could I see you in my office for a minute?" Jennifer was usually friendly and casual, but her expression was serious now. Professional. I followed her into her glass-walled office, my palms starting to sweat. "Is everything all right?" I asked as she closed the door behind us. "I hope so," Jennifer said, settling behind her desk. "I received a call this morning from someone claiming to have information about your personal conduct that might reflect poorly on the company." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of information?" "The caller suggested that you might be engaging in extramarital affairs and posting about them on social media." Jennifer's voice was carefully neutral. "They said it was inappropriate for someone in HR to be setting that kind of example." That's completely false," I stammered. "Who called you?" The caller didn't identify themselves. "But Lysandra, I need to ask, is there any truth to this? Any situation that might be misinterpreted or taken out of context?" I thought about Friday night, about Callan's t-shirt, and the coffee made just right, and the Instagram story with my laugh in the background, about Owen's screenshot, and the look on his face when I'd tried to explain. "No," I said firmly. "There's no truth to it. Someone is obviously trying to cause trouble for me." Jennifer nodded slowly. "I figured as much. Your work here has always been exemplary, and your personal life is your own business. But I wanted to give you a heads up that someone out there seems to have it in for you." "I appreciate that. Do you have any idea who might have called?" Like I said, they didn't identify themselves, but it was a woman, someone who seemed to know specific details about your social media activity. Ivy. It had to be Ivy. But how could I explain that without making the whole situation sound worse? "I'll be more careful about my privacy settings," I said instead. "Good idea. And, Lysandra, if there's anything going on in your personal life that might affect your work, please let me know. I'd rather hear it from you than from anonymous callers." I nodded and escaped back to my cubicle, my hands shaking as I tried to focus on my computer screen. This was spiraling out of control faster than I'd anticipated. I needed to talk to Callan, needed to make sure we were on the same page about what had happened Friday night. But first, I needed to deal with Ivy. I waited until my lunch break, then drove to the coffee shop where Ivy worked part-time. It was a trendy little place downtown, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, the kind of spot that charged $6 for a latte and acted like they were doing you a favor. Ivy was behind the counter, her purple-streaked hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Satisfaction? It was hard to tell. "Hey, Lysandra," she said, her voice artificially bright. "What can I get you?" "Just a regular coffee," I said, "and maybe a few minutes to talk." The shop was mostly empty, the lunch rush had ended, and the afternoon crowd hadn't arrived yet. Ivy glanced around, then nodded toward a table in the corner. "I can take my break," she said. She made my coffee and came around the counter, settling across from me with her own cup. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. So, she said, stirring sugar into her latte. How was your weekend? Fine, I said carefully. How was yours? Interesting. She took a sip of her drink, watching me over the rim. I saw some stuff on Instagram that was pretty surprising. Ivy, did you know Callan still has photos of you two from high school in his apartment? Like framed photos, on his nightstand. I blinked, caught off guard. What? Yeah, I noticed them a few weeks ago when I stayed over. Asked him about it, and he got all weird and defensive. Said you were just friends, that it didn't mean anything. She laughed bitterly. Just friends don't usually have shrine-like photo displays of each other. I didn't know about any photos, I said honestly. Right, and I'm sure you didn't know he talks about you constantly either. Lysandra this, Lysandra that. Remember when Lysandra and I did this thing in high school? Remember that time Lysandra said something funny? I could hear the hurt in her voice, and despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Ivy, I'm sorry if you feel like... Did you sleep with him? The question hit me like a slap. What? Friday night. Did you sleep with him? No, I said firmly. I slept on his couch. Nothing happened. In his bedroom? I frowned. What do you mean? The Instagram story. I could see his bedroom in the background. The same bedroom where he keeps those framed photos of you. Ivy leaned forward, her eyes intense. So, if you were sleeping on the couch, why were you in his bedroom at 4 a.m? My mouth went dry. I'd been so focused on the timestamp and my laugh in the background that I hadn't paid attention to the actual visual details of Callan's story. But Ivy was right. If you could see his bedroom in the shot, then that's where the video had been taken. I don't remember, I said weakly. You don't remember. Ivy's voice was flat. You don't remember being in your best friend's bedroom at 4 a.m., wearing his clothes, laughing like you didn't have a care in the world. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Lysandra? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having an affair with my boyfriend and lying about it to everyone, including your husband. We're not having an affair, I said, but even to my own ears it sounded unconvincing. Ivy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I don't even care anymore. Callan made his choice a long time ago. He's been in love with you since high school, and I was stupid enough to think I could compete with that. Ivy, please. But your husband deserves to know the truth, and if you won't tell him, maybe someone else should. She walked back to the counter, leaving me sitting alone with my untouched coffee, and the growing realization that my carefully constructed story was falling apart. I pulled out my phone and called Callan. We need to talk, I said when he answered. Now. I met Callan at Riverside Park, away from prying eyes and listening ears. He was sitting on our old bench, the one where we used to hang out after school, sharing secrets and dreams we thought no one else would understand. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ivy knows, I said without preamble as I sat down beside him. Callan didn't look surprised. I figured. She's been giving me the silent treatment all weekend. She saw your Instagram story. She knows it was taken in your bedroom, not the living room like I told Owen. Shit. Callan ran his hands through his hair. I was drunk when I posted it. I didn't think about the background. What exactly happened Friday night, Cal? I need to know everything, because my story is falling apart and people are asking questions. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the river. You really don't remember? I remember drinking too much at Rebecca's party. I remember complaining about Owen and his mother. I remember you offering to let me crash at your place. I paused. I remember waking up in your bed wearing your shirt. You were upset, Callan said slowly. Really upset. You said Owen made you feel invisible, like you were just going through the motions of being married. You said you felt like you were disappearing. I did remember that conversation now hazily. We'd been sitting on his couch and I'd been crying. Callan had listened and offered comfort, the way he always had. We talked for hours, he continued, about high school, about the paths we'd taken, about what might have been different if... He trailed off. If what? If I'd been brave enough to tell you how I felt back then, before you met Owen. My heart started beating faster. Cal, you kissed me, Lise. The words hung in the air between us like a confession. I stared at him, searching my memory for any trace of it, but there was nothing. Just a wine-soaked blur of emotions and regrets. I kissed you. Around 3:30, we were talking about prom night, remember? How we went as friends because neither of us had dates, but we both wanted to go together as more than friends. You said you'd always wondered what would have happened if we'd been honest with each other. Fragments were coming back now. The warmth of his living room, the way he'd looked at me when I'd talked about feeling trapped in my marriage, the electricity I'd felt when our hands had touched. Did we do anything else? Callan shook his head. You pulled away pretty quickly, said you were married, that it was a mistake. But then you started crying again, and I offered to let you sleep in my bed while I took the couch. You said you didn't want to be alone. So we slept in the same bed. Yeah, but nothing happened, Lise, I swear. You fell asleep almost immediately, and I held you, like we used to when we were kids and you'd have nightmares. I closed my eyes, trying to process this information. A kiss, sleeping in his bed, in his arms. No wonder Owen had looked so suspicious when I'd come home in Callan's shirt. Talking about coffee made just the way I liked it. The Instagram story, I said. Why did you post it? I don't know. I was lying there at 4 a.m., listening to you laugh in your sleep. You always did that when you were dreaming, and I felt happy. Really happy for the first time in months. So I grabbed my phone and posted something stupid without thinking it through. You tagged me. I wanted the world to know you were there. I wanted to pretend just for a minute that this was my life, that you were mine. The raw honesty in his voice made my chest ache. Cal, I know you're married. I know you have a daughter and a whole life that doesn't include me. But Friday night felt like a glimpse of what we could have had. It was a mistake, I said firmly. I was drunk and upset, and I made a terrible decision, but it can't happen again. Can't it? He turned to face me fully. Are you happy, Lise? Really happy? Because you didn't seem happy Friday night. I thought about Owen's cold silence over the weekend, about Judith's disapproving looks and the anonymous call to my office, about the way my husband had looked at me when he'd shown me that screenshot, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. My marriage isn't perfect, I said carefully, but that doesn't mean I should blow it up. Maybe it's already blown up. Maybe Friday night was just you finally admitting what's been true for a long time. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Clara's name flashed on the screen. I have to take this, I said, stepping away from the bench. Hey, Clara. Where are you? My sister asked. I'm at the coffee shop and you're not here. I glanced at my watch. 5:15. I was supposed to meet Clara 15 minutes ago. I'm sorry, something came up. Can we reschedule? Actually, I'm glad you're not here yet, because I need to ask you something, and I'd rather do it over the phone. Something in her tone made me nervous. What's going on? Ivy Tran called me this afternoon. My stomach dropped. What? She said she needed to talk to someone in your family about something important, something about you and Callan. Clara, I can explain. She told me about Friday night, about the Instagram story and the phone call she made to your work. Clara's voice was tight with disappointment. Please tell me she's lying. I looked over at Callan, who was watching me with concern. It's complicated. It's not complicated, Lysandra. Either you're having an affair with your best friend or you're not. I'm not having an affair, I said, but the words felt hollow even to me. But something happened Friday night. I was quiet for so long that Clara spoke again. I can't believe this. I can't believe you would do this to Owen, to Tessa. You don't understand, then help me understand. Explain to me how sleeping over at another man's house and posting about it on social media isn't cheating. I didn't post anything. Callan did, and I untagged myself as soon as I saw it. After Owen had already seen it. Yes, but there's no but, Lise. You cheated on your husband and got caught, and now you're trying to manage the fallout instead of taking responsibility. The accusation stung because it was true. I was trying to manage the fallout. I was trying to control the narrative, minimize the damage, make it all go away. I made a mistake, I said quietly. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. This is a choice, a series of choices that led you to another man's bed. It wasn't like that. What was it like then? Because Ivy seemed to have a pretty clear picture of what happened. I could hear the disappointment in my sister's voice, and it made me want to cry. Clara had always looked up to me, had always come to me for advice about her own relationship problems. Now she was talking to me like I was a stranger. I need some time to figure this out, I said. Figure what out? How to save your marriage or how to end it? I don't know. The admission hung between us like a chasm. I'd said it out loud now. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to fight for my marriage or run toward whatever Callan was offering. I think you should stay away from Colin while you figure it out, Clara said finally. And I think you should tell Owen the truth. All of it. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Everything okay? Callan asked when I returned to the bench. No, I said honestly. Everything is falling apart. He reached for my hand and I let him take it. His fingers were warm and familiar, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to choose this, to choose him. But then I thought about Tessa, asleep in her bed with her stuffed animals and her nightlight shaped like a butterfly. I thought about Owen, who had never once raised his voice at me, who brought me coffee every morning without being asked, who had built a life with me, even if it wasn't the passionate romance I'd dreamed of as a teenager. I have to go home, I said, pulling my hand away. Lies. I have to go home and tell my husband the truth, and then I have to figure out how to fix this mess. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that some messes were too big to fix. Some choices had consequences that rippled out in ways you couldn't control or contain, and I was about to discover just how far those ripples could reach. When I walked into my house that evening, Owen was in the kitchen making dinner. Tessa was at the table working on homework, her tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully formed letters with her purple crayon. "Mommy," she called out when she saw me. "Look, I wrote a story about our family." She held up her paper, and I could see stick figures drawn in bright colors. A tall figure labeled Daddy, a smaller figure labeled me, and a figure with long hair labeled Mommy. We were all holding hands and smiling. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, my voice catching slightly. Owen glanced up from the stove. "You're late." "I know. I'm sorry. I had to handle something at work." It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either, and from the look Owen gave me, he knew it. "Tessa, why don't you go wash your hands for dinner?" he said. "But I'm not done with my story yet." "You can finish it after we eat." Tessa grumbled, but obediently slid off her chair and headed toward the bathroom. As soon as she was out of earshot, Owen turned to face me fully. "I know," he said quietly. My heart stopped. "Know what?" "I know about the kiss." The kitchen seemed to tilt around me. "Owen." Callan called me this afternoon. He said he needed to tell me something before I heard it from someone else. I gripped the back of a chair for support. "What did he say?" "That you kissed him Friday night, that you slept in his bed, that he's been in love with you for years, and Friday night made him realize he couldn't pretend to be just friends anymore." The room was spinning now. Callan had called Owen, had told him everything, had blown up my marriage while I was sitting in a park trying to figure out how to save it. "I can explain." "Can you?" Owen's voice was still eerily calm, but I could see the pain in his eyes now. Because I've been trying to understand this all weekend, trying to figure out what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. But maybe this isn't about me at all. It's not about you, I said quickly. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why, Lysandra? Why did you go to him instead of coming home to me? I opened my mouth to give him the answers I'd been rehearsing. I was drunk, it was a mistake, it didn't mean anything. But looking at Owen's face, seeing the genuine confusion and hurt there, I found myself telling the truth instead. Because he sees me, I said quietly. Because when I talk to him, I feel like the person I used to be. Before I became just a wife and mother and employee. Before I became invisible. Owen flinched like I'd slapped him. You think I don't see you? When's the last time you really looked at me, Owen? When's the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about schedules or bills or your mother's opinion about something? We talk all the time. We exchange information. We coordinate logistics. We don't talk about dreams or fears or what makes us happy anymore. I bring you coffee every morning, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I remember how you like it. I pay attention. I know, and I love that you do that. But Callan remembers too, and when he hands me coffee, he also asks me how I'm feeling. He wants to know what I'm thinking about. So this is my fault? Because I'm not romantic enough? Because I don't ask the right questions? No, it's my fault. For not telling you what I needed. For not fighting harder for us. For running to someone else instead of trying to fix what was broken here. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of 8 years of marriage hanging between us. I could hear Tessa singing to herself in the bathroom, oblivious to the fact that her world was cracking apart just a few feet away. Do you love him? Owen asked finally. I thought about lying. It would be easier to say no, to pretend Friday night was just a moment of weakness that didn't mean anything. But I'd already hurt him with enough lies. I don't know, I said. I think I might. But I love you too, Owen. I love our family. I love the life we've built together. But it's not enough. I don't know, I repeated, hating myself for the uncertainty in my voice. Owen nodded slowly, like he was processing information he'd already suspected. Callan said he told you he couldn't pretend to be just friends anymore. Yes. And what did you tell him? That I needed time to figure things out. I see. Owen turned back to the stove, stirring the pasta sauce with mechanical precision. Well, I've had some time to think too, and I've made some decisions. Something in his tone made me nervous. What kind of decisions? I called a lawyer today. The words hit me like a physical blow. Owen, no, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... I also called my mother, asked her if she could take Tessa for a few days while we sort this out. You told Judith. I told her we were having some marital problems and needed space to work through them. She didn't ask for details. But she would figure them out soon enough. Judith had never liked me, had never thought I was good enough for her son. This would just confirm everything she'd always believed about me. Owen, please, don't do this. Don't give up on us. He turned to face me again, and I was shocked to see that his eyes were dry. No tears, no anger, just a kind of resigned sadness. I'm not giving up on us, Lysandra. You already did that. I'm just making it official. Daddy? Tessa's voice came from the doorway. Why are you and Mummy talking so quiet? Owen immediately shifted gears, his voice becoming warm and reassuring. We're just discussing grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. Are you fighting? No, baby, we're not fighting. But Tessa wasn't fooled. She looked back and forth between us, her 6-year-old intuition picking up on the tension, even if she couldn't understand its source. Can we eat dinner now? She asked in a small voice. Of course, Owen said. Go sit at the table. I'll bring your plate. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about Tessa's day at school and her upcoming dance recital. But underneath the normalcy, I could feel everything shifting. Owen was different, distant in a way that felt permanent. And Tessa kept glancing between us with worried eyes. After dinner, Owen helped Tessa with her bath and bedtime routine while I cleaned the kitchen. It was a normal evening in many ways, but it felt like we were all playing roles in a family that was already dissolving. When Tessa was finally asleep, Owen and I sat in the living room with the television on, not really watching. The silence stretched between us until I couldn't stand it anymore. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you decide what you want," Owen said, "because I'm done trying to compete with a ghost." "A ghost?" "The person you used to be, the life you think you could have had." "I can't fight that, Lysandra. I can't make you want the life we've built together." "I do want it. I need to know if there's something else out there. Something more." Owen looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something die in his eyes. "Then go find out." "What?" "Go be with Callan. See if what you think you feel is real. See if the grass is actually greener." "And what about Tessa?" "Tessa will be fine. Kids are resilient. She'll adjust." "And what about us?" Owen stood up, suddenly looking exhausted. "There is no us anymore, Lysandra. There's just two people who used to be married, trying to figure out how to co-parent." He headed toward the stairs, then paused. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow I'll help you pack some things. You can stay with Clara until you figure out your next move." "Owen, wait." But he was already gone, leaving me alone in the living room with the television flickering and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I pulled out my phone and stared at Callan's number. I could call him, tell him that Owen knew everything, that my marriage was over. I could drive to his apartment and fall into his arms and pretend that this was what I'd wanted all along. But instead, I found myself thinking about Tessa's drawing. The 3 stick figures holding hands, smiling, labeled, "Our Family." The innocence in her face when she'd shown it to me, the pride in her voice. I thought about Owen bringing me coffee every morning for 8 years, about the way he'd held my hand during labor, whispering encouragement when I thought I couldn't push anymore, about the house we'd bought together, painting the nursery yellow because we'd wanted to be surprised about the baby's gender. I thought about all the small moments that had built our life together, not passionate or dramatic, but steady and real and good. And I thought about Callan, who remembered how I liked my coffee, but had never held my hair back when I was sick, who listened to my dreams, but had never changed a diaper, or walked the floor with a crying baby, or sat through a parent-teacher conference. But it was too late for regrets now. I'd made my choice the moment I'd kissed Callan in his living room. Everything that happened after that was just consequence. I turned off the television and headed upstairs to pack. 3 weeks later, I was living in Clara's spare room, calling my divorce a life transition because it sounded less like failure. The papers waited on the kitchen table, 8 years reduced to signatures. I felt numb, not free. Callan asked me to leave everything and start over with him in Portland, but I couldn't abandon my daughter for a fantasy rooted in who we were at 17. I said no. That night, I finally understood what I'd lost, and what I refused to lose again. I hadn't gained freedom, I'd gained clarity, and for the first time, that felt like enough.